struggling to survive the worst drought to grip East Africa in 60 years. Overall, more than 12 million people in the region straddling Somalia, Ethiopia and Kenya are also in dire need of food assistance. The Kenya Red Cross says at least 1 million people in northern Kenya are facing starvation. The government projects the need for food aid will rise to 3.5 million people by September from about 2.4 million at present. One of the hardest hit regions is Turkana, where men, women and children trek from their villages every day to feeding centers. Those too frail to walk to the center, such as the elderly, spend nights in the open at the feeding centers. Doctors and nurses at the district hospital in the county's capital, Lodwar, are relying on aid to treat cases of malnutrition. Maureen Awisit is a clinical officer at the hospital. She says malnutrition cases have soared since May.
There is an increased trend of admission, and the criteria of admission is very worse since most of the patients we are admitting are severely malnourished, and most of them are put on the supportive meal, which is F75 and F100. Unlike before, we are admitting some of them to the outpatient therapeutic feeding program and supplementary feeding program. And currently the admissions are going very high because it's actually doubling.
8 agencies report that up to 30% of households in the region depend on food aid, and UNICEF estimates that 40% of children are malnourished. The hospital reported 4 deaths last month, but officials fear there might be more deaths in August.
This year the number is quite high because by last month alone we had 4 deaths because of malnutrition alone, and around 20 patients so far in the ward. Yeah.
The question some are asking is how and why did things get this bad? The UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Valerie Amos, recently visited East Africa. She says political factors, repeated droughts, backward cultivating practices, and a single dietary structure all contribute to the food crisis.
But for the longer term, tackling drought and food crisis in this part of Africa requires a longer term solution, investment in safety net programs, in water harvesting programs, building the resilience of the communities that are facing rising population growth, that are facing environmental degradation, climate change, poor governance, as well as conflict in Somalia.
Joining us now here in Washington for more insight on what could have been done to prevent the famine in East Africa is Ephraim Konya, a senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute. A native of Tanzania, Mr. Konya is an expert on land management and natural resources in sub-Saharan countries. Mr. Konya, welcome to In Focus. And one thing I want to ask is, it might be the worst famine or the worst drought in 60 years, but that region is not new to such incidents or episodes of drought and famine. What was known way before this happened?
Well, there are methods of forecasting that there is a drought coming. And recently, there is an improvement using satellite images to take photographs of the vegetation, and it is very possible for now to be able to predict up to 80% accuracy that there is going to be food shortage of this amount. And there has been an improvement on that forecasting.
But then what wasn't done? If the information was there, we presume that the world knew that it's going to happen the way things have happened. What ought to have been done?
Well, the problem with the forecasting is that it's a short term. They cannot predict, like Joseph in Egypt predicted 7 years that there is going to be famine. They can't do that. They just predict events that are going to happen within 1 year period. So, and it's not going to give you enough time to prepare for what is going to happen. So you asked me what can be done. Actually, what can be done is more investment in agriculture. Look at the investment, for example, the donors which are giving to Africa. They spend only 5% of their aid to Africa on agriculture. But look at how much money they are spending on humanitarian assistance. It's about 7%. So you see, they are spending more money for humanitarian, which is a response to an emergency, instead of investing more money to invest so that that emergence does not happen, which is an investment in agriculture. The governments of Africa also spend around the same amount of money on agriculture, only about 5%, even though agriculture on average contributes about 30% to 40% of the GDP of the African countries.
Yes, what exactly needs to change in terms of the agricultural practices and policy, particularly in that region, in order to have food security?
As Valerie indicated, there should be long-term investment in irrigation and water harvesting so that farmers will be able to respond correctly to the drought problems. There should also be investment in research so that they can, the farmers can be using drought-tolerant crops and also to have livestock which are they're adapted to such kind of environment.
So many of the people who reside in that region are actually pastoralists. They're
Yes.
not typically agricultural kind of people. What should be done? What should change about how they own their animals and how they take care of their animals?
The biggest problem that kills the animals is actually water. So the water harvesting that I was talking about is very, very important. There should be some dams where there is a valley bottom dams that they have been using in the past. They can be able to manage that. And another thing is that these are pastoralists. They are like, they have no borders. They can move from one place to another. But that now is becoming even less amenable because of the increasing population, which is not allowing the pastoralists to be moving from one place to another as they have been doing in the past, in long past. Now things are changing, and the governments should respond accordingly to help them to be able to adapt to such kind of changes. And this is something which has not been coming through over time, and there is very little investment in livestock sector itself, even though that the livestock sector is supporting a lot of people, and also the demand for animal products is actually increasing, the incomes of the people increase.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for those insights. Ephraim Konya is a senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute. Thank you very much for joining us
You're most welcome.
here today.